project that she's going to describe, and Jeff Canton, I see in the middle of my screen, Mark Rasmussen, but Jeff said, oh, guess what? The Buzzards Bay Coalition has a small grant program for projects in the watershed. And it looked like the project that the high school students are doing, which Lily is going to describe, might be an eligible project. And I think the deadline is the end of March. And so it is a perfect example of resilience. And so that is, it identifies a stressor and it identifies what you can do to deal with the stressor. But Lily told me, I don't know, 45 minutes ago that she's already leading a very busy life, that she has to jump off the call in half an hour. So I said, if it's all right with all of you, take her out of order, let her describe the project. And what I hope is if you all see the merit of what the environment group is doing, that the four of us saw, that I might coax out of you a motion that the CRC would endorse the project. Then together on the Zoom call, we can all lean on Mark Rasmussen right here. No, I'm just joking, Mark, but we could endorse the project and write a letter on behalf. But let's let, if that's all right, and I could get a sense that the agenda with that one change is okay. And I get nods of heads, or any. Okay. Lily, why don't you describe what your group is doing?
So I'm not sure if you saw the email that I sent yesterday, but I had mentioned that we did have a grant for that project already from the Watershed Alliance. So we were talking about maybe doing something different for that.
Oh, all right. Well, well, tell me about. I didn't see that. So,
okay.
Tell me what your plan is.
So for the pollinator garden.
Yeah.
So currently we got a grant from the Westport Watershed Alliance, and we're making a pollinator garden in a little like grass island in the back of the Westport High School. We're going to fill it with our native plants, and I think we're getting them soon, and we're going to start like building the area. We did a presentation at the elementary school where we talked about pollinator gardens and like talked to all the students about the club and how they could help, and like hopefully to convince them to take action and maybe join the club when they get older. But we thought that the pollinator garden would be a good opportunity for us to like reach out and educate people in the area, also bring some awareness to environmental issues into the school and the building, and hopefully could lead to more opportunities for us.
And so two things. One, Mike Sullivan is here. He's head of the board of the Watershed Alliance. So that's terrific that the Watershed Alliance is doing that. They have excellent programs in education. Why did you choose a pollinator garden, Lily?
Well, I think a lot of us thought that it just, because the building was so new, it wasn't very like homely looking yet. And we didn't have like anything, we don't have anything planted, like we still don't have anything planted. So we felt like it could use some life, and we felt that was an accessible project for us to work on, but also just because we live in a farming community, and we thought it would be like good for us to do in this area, just because it's like has to do with our town.
Well, and as you explained to us yesterday, whenever we met with you, it was yesterday, right?
Yeah.
It seems like a long time ago. It was only yesterday that you said a couple of things. One, bees and other pollinators are under stress from climate change. And so a pollinator garden is something that addresses that stress condition of something in a right to farm community. If you don't have pollinators, you're out of luck. And so it's very important for a community like Westport to have healthy pollinators. And the other thing is the new high school, middle school is surrounded. What's not parking is grass. And as you said, well, grass isn't really a healthy thing to have growing. You want things that are a richer uh, uh, species. So that is, we thought, an excellent idea. Now, what is the other project you're thinking of?
I think we were just I haven't really talked with the club much because last time we spoke was yesterday, but I remember at the end of the meeting, we were discussing doing the interviews with farmers or doing some presentation with the school. So I think we might talk about that, but I think it was Jeff sent out an email saying that it could possibly be like a summer project, but I haven't talked with Silva yet.
Okay. Jeff, do you want to add anything? You're on mute right now, but Jeff was there, Mike Yagman was there, David Cole was also there. Or David, do you want to, you got your hand
Yes,
up?
I do. I have to. Anyway, I followed up today and contacted the Round the Bend farm, which has bees and has done things to. They've taken over Lucy Cabot's bees after she died, and now have them over there. There are also some of the Millikens, Trip and Dora Millikens, but some of her hives. But anyway, the Round the Bend farm is very interested in working with the Environment Club at the high school and exploring ways to do that on this subject and on others. So I want to try to arrange a meeting soon, maybe for Lily and to go over there and see what can be worked out. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Round the Bend farm, but it's a great entity and I think they'll be very helpful.
Thanks, David. While we're on this topic, do either Michael or Jeff want to add anything?
I'll let Jeff talk about his suggestion for a new grant that Lily and the group could apply for.
Yeah, sure. So I think we all recognize that we have a great group here, but we need to begin engaging with the community, letting them know what we've learned about the impacts of climate change on Westport so far, and finding out what their concerns are. So one idea would be to use the students in the environmental club to equip them with some video equipment and go out in the community and interview representatives of the different sectors that are affected, both population-wise, industry-wise, farmers, fishermen, marina operations, town officials, potentially senior citizens, students themselves. So we could come up with quite a long list of potential interview candidates and create some content that we can use down the line in social media engagement and other types of outreach within Westport. I think that that provides great experience for the students and helps them learn about Westport and what people are thinking about climate change, as well as taking advantage of their expertise in the most effective outreach mechanisms we have today, which are social media.
So Jeff and Lily, this outreach of interviews would be the subject of the grant application that you would put together to the Buzzards Bay Coalition by the end of the month?
Yeah, I think the grant, education, climate change education, including experiential learning opportunities, is the first topic that they list in the grant. So I'm hoping that this would fall under that, and I think we could put together an application fairly quickly.
So, would you want an endorsement from the Climate Resilience Committee? And if so, would you make a motion to that effect?
Okay, sure. It's not required, but it would be welcome. So I would make a motion if anybody agrees that the committee endorse this proposal.
Is there,
I would
Second.
second, well, Michael and I both seconded.
oh, okay, we have a joint second. I don't know what Robert's rule says about joint seconds, but
I'll
what the
let
heck?
Michael- I defer to Michael.
We could have a joint second. Why not? Any discussion on this? I don't see any hands raised and I don't hear anyone. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any
Aye.
opposition? All right.
What-
Well, Lily. Oh, yeah, Mark.
Can I abstain from that discussion?
Yes,
should
please,
abstain.
Amy, as you do the minutes, would you please have Mark Rasmussen recorded as saying he's granting the, no, not that he's granting the application right away, that he's abstaining from the
Abstaining.
vote.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah,
Oh.
and just one note, just to let everybody know, because it's a fun story. We ended up with this grant fund because of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day was 2020 and it was canceled. So a lot of great people had raised a lot of money to hold a big celebration in New Bedford for the 50th Earth Day. This is the money that's left over from the event that never happened, and so we
Oh.
wanted to get it back out to the community. So we're giving away other people's money, but it's a neat little opportunity. So
That's
Thanks.
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Mark.
John,
All right.
I think Joseph's got his
Yeah,
hand.
Mike.
No, I think Joseph's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Joe.
Mhm.
Joseph.
I just think this is an exceptional idea, to videotape and record the memory and experiences of farmers and fishermen and others regarding climate change. It really is very timely, and it will be a record, I think, for the future. So congratulations! It's a great idea. And just a comment for Lily. Some years ago we worked on pollinator gardens in the shape of oversized butterflies at the Macumber School, and I have to say that it was quite successful because we had multiple underground hives of bumblebees, literally hundreds of bumblebees. We recorded numbers of butterflies and other types of insects and dragonflies that made use of the pollinator gardens in what was literally a gravel-strewn a lawn. So it sort of was transformed and increased the biodiversity for the students. And we brought in books on butterfly identification and brought in the Lloyd Center scientists to give a discussion for the students. So I think that Lily's on track to something that would help to transform the grounds of the high school and middle school and library. So thank you.
Well said, Joseph. And I know David's got his hand up, but if there's a way that the wisdom inherent in that experience can get transferred to the Environment Club, I think it would be very useful. David, your hand is up.
Well, I just wanted to mention that beside Joseph's house and behind Mike Sullivan's office at the watershed, there is a retention basin which does sort of that kind of same thing. And over at the Allen's Pond Sanctuary, they have a butterfly garden right next to the field station, Horseneck Road. And so there have been other things that have been done like that. But I do think that this idea of the interviews and so forth, and I just want to mention that a key person in helping the students work on that, I think, will be John Resendez, who was sort of in charge of all of the television programs and activities at the high school. And he will, I'm sure, be very enthusiastic and helpful on this. So we've got the team in place and they've got the new equipment in place. And so all we need is a little nickel and dime stuff from our dear friends at the coalition.
All right, I don't want to spend the whole meeting on this, but Michael Yagman has his hand up.
Well, one quick thing is that in addition to what the grant will do in terms of interviews, I think that Lily and the Environmental Club can, publicize what they've done and potentially spread it through other communities throughout the South Coast.
All right. Thank you, Lily, very much for that presentation and for the meeting with the engagement committee yesterday. And I hope there are other ones like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is Courtney Rocha, who's we met with. Courtney has been a longtime member of this committee and has been very helpful in terms of connecting us to the vulnerability program. So Courtney, you're on mute, but you're on.
Great. Thank you, John. Michael and John had asked me to come here today and talk about MVP 2.0. In 2018 or 2017, Westport went through a prescribed planning process to become MVP certified. I'm not sure who was involved, but it was a one-day event where you went through your vulnerabilities in regards to infrastructure, nature, and social vulnerabilities. And the end result was a plan of Westport's top actions for climate change. That enables you to be eligible for action grants through MVP. We're now updating our planning process. So for communities to still be eligible for action grants, you'll need to go through MVP 2.0, which is a new planning process. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay, great. This first round will be releasing in April. It is a pilot project, a pilot round. We're doing 5 communities per region. I think Westport is a good candidate because they were certified very early on, so their plan is old and they need to update it. Secondly, they're interested, Westport has come to me and they're interested in somewhat of a climate action plan or community engagement. And this process will give you the tools to continue on doing that. You won't be eligible for a climate action plan for an action grant this round. So if you apply for a climate action plan, you need to be able to address everything I'm going to describe to be eligible. And I don't think Westport's there yet. I don't think any town really is there yet. So instead, and what you would be doing is not applying for an action grant in this round and applying for a planning grant through MVP 2.0. So I'm going to describe what that is. It's a 2-year process. So you would start in April. Oh, the RFR would be released in April. You would start in June and be completed in June of 2025. You would expand your core team. So whoever the core team was with the original planning grant would be expanded. You'll receive innovative training on best practices for equity, environmental justice, climate change, and engagement. And then once you've expanded your core team, gone through this equity training, you'll be able to look at your priorities from the first round and then expand them and update them. It's not a big plan at the end. It's just looking at your priorities. Do some make sense? Are they not eligible anymore? Do you have new information with all of the equity training that you've gained through this process? So updating your priority actions. These priority actions make you eligible for action grants. That's year 1. So you'll have around $30,000 to do this. You'll hire a vendor. We don't have a prescribed list. You'll hire a vendor who you feel will meet all of the requirements of our program. So, and they will have, it's a prescribed yet flexible process. So the vendor, you and me will go through this together and update your plan. Second part is year 2. You'll receive around $50,000 of seed money to do what they're calling a seed project. It can be thought of as a mini action grant. So if Westport wants to continue the climate action plan work, or if they want to do, they can do whatever they want within reason towards climate change was this $50,000. It's guaranteed funding. So around $30,000 to replan, reach out to your community, learn, be trained in equity, and then $50,000 to do a seed project. The way I'm describing this to communities is that when they're applying for action grants, people really know what their infrastructure problems are. They're very aware of what their natural resource shortcomings are for the most part. But our program very much focuses on social resilience as well. And many communities don't have the skills, the tools, the training across the state to be able to address social and community vulnerabilities to climate change. So this program is really all about people in your town, who they are, what they're doing, what are their vulnerabilities, and bringing that up to par with your knowledge of natural systems and infrastructure, which will make you extremely competitive for future action grant rounds. Do you have any questions at this point?
So I think next on the agenda is Michael Burris, who's going to, our town planner, who I think is going to try and translate Courtney's advice into how we're going to fill that. Now, he may have other information too, because the planning staff has been really turning out very aggressively grant seeking in a number of different ways. But Michael, are you going to describe how we are going to take Courtney's advice and apply it, or are you? Is your section of the agenda other grant updates?
Sure. So we'll talk about other grant updates in a second, but I think Courtney really said it very succinctly, that the way we would use this MVP 2.0 grant is to as a platform to develop our own or reprioritize and expand upon our initial MVP application, and then use that as a platform to develop our climate action plan. So I think she hit the nail on the head. I don't have anything else to add in particular.
And we have, I think at the last meeting, requested a number of letters of endorsement for this. We've gotten some, and we appreciate that. So we are going to meet this deadline, and we appreciate, Courtney, first of all, your attendance regularly at CRC meetings. We know that you serve a number of communities in the area that you're responsible for. So we really do appreciate your attending our meetings and your guiding Westport through this process. We really do appreciate that, and we are going to file this application based on your advice. And we know it's a long process, but hey, this problem isn't going away. So we're not worried that the problem's going to solve itself, in the meantime. So, Michael, you want to continue with other grants that you're working on? Oh, David.
John, I believe a handful of folks want to have some.
All right. So let's start with Jim Whiten.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I was intimately involved in the first round that we did with MVP back 5-6 years ago. I do believe that it was very successful. I'm not sure it was just one day; it might have been two.
Three.
We did hire three. So it was. I think we had Serpent, who was the contract agent for that at the time. And I think we did a very good job of outlining the climate resilience items, but we didn't address environmental justice or extend it to more outreach. So I look forward to doing that.
Thanks. Mark Rasmussen, you got your hand up.
Hey, Courtney, question about the relationship between planning grants and action grants. So you said planning grant cycle is 2 years. Does that mean for the 2 years you're in your planning grant, you can't apply for an action grant?
I don't believe so. I don't believe that is the case. I'm hoping that they'll still be able to apply for action grants in the meantime. But I don't know I don't know for sure. You'd have to, of course, demonstrate capacity, but there isn't a reason why you can't continue on with action grants.
Great.
And
That's great. Thanks.
and hopefully, you get more. This group is doing a lot of the legwork all the time. So hopefully throughout this process, you build in new partners who will be able to take on different projects tangentially.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
John, can I chime in here?
Sure, David.
When we did the initial planning process, we had not only Serpide, we had Manomet, we had Mass Audubon people working with us, and some of us visited the trial runs that they were doing in Middleborough and elsewhere. And then when they came here, why we did work with them very effectively and had a series of meetings and developed, I thought, a very useful and comprehensive initial assessment. And that's been available on our website ever since. But we've then moved on and followed up on that, and we did the two most highly recommended projects that came out of that, and we've done reports on that. We've also moved on, and Mark Rasmussen and his group is doing a major study of beach erosion and other matters all up and down the coast. And I think we're, I hesitate to say this, Courtney, but I think we're way ahead of where you are. And that what you are suggesting would get us to go back and redo what we've already done very effectively. And I would urge you to look at that original report very carefully and look at the subsequent things that we've done and think about really where we are standing at this point. And, we've got expertise on this group from our chairman on across the board, people who know a hell of a lot about this whole matter. And so I don't think we need to educate this committee. I think we need to get this committee activated to educating the community. And so I think there's a misfit between where you are and where we are. And I hope we can find some way to work that out.
Well, thank you, David. But
I think that's an interesting point, David, that you make. I've heard this point across the Commonwealth and in many communities that they feel like they've done their work and they know where they are. But this is not it's to provide equity training and outreach and teach you to give those skills out to the community and bring more of the community on board. That's the purpose, is to broaden who's doing this work, who's showing up, who are on these meetings. You want more people doing this work in your town, and the goal is to train people and provide funding to know how to do this within your community. And on the other hand, eventually you will have to be certified in this new planning process to receive any more MVP funding. So it's similar to a hazard mitigation plan. You have to update it every 5 years. This is not meant to be a heavy lift in terms of paperwork. This is meant to be a heavy lift in education across the board, because there are certainly members of the community that aren't represented in this group. And not everyone, especially myself, has the training and the know-how how to respectfully reach out to those groups and get them involved. So that's why you might pair with Serpide and another group. Maybe even Serpide doesn't have all the tools to do this very specific equity environmental justice training. So I think it's a really interesting point. I think it's well taken. I hear you, but I believe in this process. I think across the board, no matter who you are in the Commonwealth, you'll benefit from this.
Thank you, Courtney. Now I want to go back to Michael because this isn't the only grant the planning department is working on.
Before we move on from this item, John, I believe you wanted to consider a motion to support our office's application to the MVP 2.0 program.
Oh, right. Okay. So we would entertain a motion to support the, so is this coming from the town or the CRC? Or
We
the
would-
planning board, planning department?
It would be so the planning board would be applying on the behalf of the CRC.
Okay, so I would like a motion for the CRC to support the application to MVP 2.0. If someone would make that motion. Mark Rasmussen makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Jim Whiten seconds. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we've got a motion. I appreciate that. So we can go ahead and file that by the April deadline. And Courtney had to leave, so thank you, Courtney, for that. Now, Michael, there are other grants you wanted to talk to us about too, right?
Yeah, one is two. I guess it's two grants and one program. We submitted 2 grant applications to the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program grant. The first one was prepared by Buzzards Bay on our behalf. That application requested funds to replace 56 septic systems in the LET and replace that with a neighborhood denitrifying wastewater system. And this would help the LET neighborhood reduce its nitrogen contamination in the Buzzards Bay. The funds that they requested on our behalf, and we submitted the application, they prepared it for us, but just to be clear. But the funds would be used for to initiate the public engagement process with the LET, develop the systems design, and secure the permitting necessary for that project. Before I move on, does anybody have any comments?
Well, let's not initiate the discussion because the coalition and the Watershed Alliance have been discussing this with the LET for quite a while, but to
Sure.
continue it, right? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, reinitiate
Yeah.
the conversation. Yeah.
Any discussion? All right, so move along.
And then the second application we submitted to that program was it was just a small grant for Westport's MS4 permit, which is the municipal separate storm sewer permit. And so the work that we're going to do through that, if we get funding, is to identify and address illicit discharges into our stormwater system, into our storm sewer. We'll create some GIS maps of that infrastructure and some data associated with that infrastructure. And then we will test the stormwater runoffs to determine the type of pollutants in that stormwater.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, Michael. The planning department's going 100 miles an hour and it's really great to see.
I do have one more, and this is a new program that, well, it's not new, but it was just announced a couple of weeks ago. It's the Southeastern New England Program, or SNAP Watershed Implementation Grant. And so this is a grant that we could potentially use to help implement our targeted integrated water resource management plan. And so while we're making some progress towards reducing nitrogen contamination from septic systems, we also need to take some steps to prevent nitrogen from getting into our water bodies through stormwater. And so what our resource management plan recommends to help do this in some different areas of town is to implement vegetative strips vegetated buffer strips near agriculture or large areas of impervious surfacing. So think about like a commercial center, parking lot, those kinds of areas. Do that as a pilot program to see what kind of interest there would be in the community to incorporate these, and then evaluate the success of these installations and their ability to filter out nitrogen pollutants in that stormwater. The only thing with this is that it being the nature of this kind of program would be that we need to have some private property owners as partners to participate in this sort of initiative. So if anybody knows any agriculture or business owners in the community who would be interested in participating, feel free to email me and get me in contact with them, just so we can have a further discussion.
Thank you, Michael. Any questions? So I have two hands raised. Jeff Canton, you're up first.
I just had a question on the timing of the NEP grants and the amounts there. When would we expect to hear, and what kind of money was requested?
I don't know the timing for the NEP grants. The denitrifying system for the LET was around 300,000. The municipal, the MS4 permit grant, that was a small grant. It's I believe it was 25,000.
Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yes, thanks.
Joseph, your hand's up.
Yeah, the vegetated buffer zone is really an excellent program and idea that's been successfully used in other countries. Certainly Germany is noted for that sort of work, both in terms of septic remediation as well as stormwater ameliation. And so good for you. I think that's great. I'm sure people will raise their hands and get involved.
Thank you, Joseph. Next on the agenda, as you can see, some of this agenda is because people have to leave early, so we try and accommodate that when we are aware of it. And Courtney has had to depart. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our January 12th meeting. This was sent out earlier. I hope people had a chance to review it. We had great attendance and we got a lot done. And so I hope people have had a chance to look at it. And if they have, I'd appreciate a motion to approve the minutes from January 12th. Don't all speak at once.
So moved.
So moved from Jim Whiten. Second? Did I hear a second from Mike Yagman? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? All right, the minutes are passed. Next is subcommittee reports. Engagement and fundraising. Now, we've talked a bit about engagement and fundraising. Is there more to that committee that anyone, David or Jeff or Michael, anyone wants to, Shauna, contribute?
We've already discussed what I was going to. I think Jeff may have some things to add. I defer to him.
Okay.
No, I think the main developments were discussed. We were pursuing potentially an action grant under MVP. After meeting with Courtney, we realized that we will probably need to go through the 2.0 process. So we're pursuing that. I think the grant possibility with the high school environmental club is a good first step for us there as well. So I am going to start working with Lily and Mr. Silva on that application, and I think we can pull it together pretty quickly. So we'll probably have something to report next meeting for you.
All right. Any other new? That's a very active committee. I mean, we have some committees that are really active and doing great work. Other committees, we need to inject something. But engagement is getting a lot of stuff done. So thank you. Anything else from engagement?
No,
Okay.
thanks. I think that's it.
All right. Water. I'm not sure, Mike, if water has met. But I know underwater, we want to have, Mark Rasmussen's got a report that's been done on marsh loss. And we thought sticking that under the water report would be a good place to do it. But Mike, before we do that, I may have missed a meeting. Has water met, or are you going to meet next week?
Yeah, we skipped a month, John. I was pretty busy, so we're gonna meet next week.
So unfortunately, I'm going to miss that. So water has been incredibly busy and productive. So the meeting is next week, and so we will defer on that. But I do. There's been a report on salt marsh loss, which is of great interest to Westport, because I can't remember the percentage of marsh in the Buzzards Bay watershed that's in Westport. It's some enormous number, but Mark Rasmussen has agreed to summarize that for us. So Mark, you want to let us know what you found out?
Yeah. I'm gonna apologize up front. I don't have much of a voice, and I've got this annoying cough. I'm gonna go kind of quickly here, but I appreciate the chance to talk about this new salt marsh report we have out. Michael, can I share my screen? Can I go through any slides?
Or Amy?
Yeah. Yep, you can. Just hit the square with the upward facing arrow.
Yep. Okay. Allow. Yep. Oh, I see. Okay, great. So perfect. Thanks, John. So you guys all see this? Do you see what oh, great. Okay, good. So back in 2017, we did a study of 6 marsh islands in the West Branch. And that study revealed a really very rapid and troubling loss rate for marshes in the West, for the island marshes in the West Branch. Of the 6 we studied, between 2001 and 2017, over a 16-year period, they had lost between 26% and 66% of their marsh area in a 16-year window. And if the rate was to continue at the same pace, the same rate of sea level rise, all those marshes in the West Branch would be gone anywhere, depending on the marsh island, between 15 years and 58 years, an average of 30 years. So really sobering information. We weren't seeing marsh loss rates like that everywhere around the bay. This seemed particularly pronounced on marsh islands in Westport, which also has the most marsh islands around Buzzards Bay. So I don't need to tell everybody here. So salt marshes are one of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. There's 9,000 acres of them on Buzzards Bay. I always say if you're going to save one piece of the bay ecosystem because it was so important, you would save salt marshes first. And we are losing them to sea level rise. So we wanted to understand this problem much more in depth than just one study. The island study was very telling, but there's a lot of complexity in the types of marshes around the bay. So in 2019, and this is very much inspired by what we found in Westport, and that we spread it bay-wide, we created a new monitoring program that we will stick with now forever. We started, this is our first 3 years that we're reporting in this report. We have no intention of stopping. This is about tracking trends and change over time. And so it becomes more valuable the longer we do it. Like I said, 2019, we started this process. Let me, how do I scroll up? Here we go. Can I scroll up? Also, how does this, I'm not sure how this works here, guys. So if I do this, can you see?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So looking around Buzzards Bay, and if you can see the dots here, we selected 10 sites around the bay, purposely trying to identify marshes of very different types. So you can see I'm going to talk mostly here about the Westport Town Farm site, which is here. We have stations on Allen's Pond and Ocean View Farm, in Demers Lloyd State Park in Dartmouth, Little Bay in Fairhaven, all around the bay. So 10 sites, Marion, Wareham, Bourne, Falmouth, to look at the different types of salt marshes, which ones, and to learn more about how they're all responding to the sea level rise we've seen in the last 20 years. So for Buzzards Bay, for our area, since 2001 till today, we've seen about 9 centimeters of sea level rise. And all the marsh change that we've experienced so far has been driven by just 9 centimeters of sea level rise. So we really want to understand how is the different parts of the bay being affected by that 9 centimeters. What we learned is it's a very different story. I want to go through this slide, this is all in the report that Michael shared everybody before the meeting. But this is the summary of findings, looking at what are the stressors on the marshes, what current conditions lead to marsh loss, and then what are the features of a marsh that's able to adapt to climate change more than others. So I'll just quickly rattle off these findings. And there's nothing revolutionary here, but we're actually documenting it with 10 sites worth of data. So on sea level rise, salt marshes with more areas sitting at low elevations are more vulnerable to marsh loss due to rising sea. Makes sense. If the marsh elevation is lower, it's getting more damaged by sea level rise today. Nitrogen pollution, marshes that are exposed to higher nitrogen concentrations in the water are more vulnerable to marsh loss because the nitrogen actually weakens the plants and affects the stability of the marsh. Tidal restrictions, this study actually found a lot of problems with tidal restrictions. Anything, a road, a culvert, a bridge that's restricting the marsh's ability to mostly drain a flood tide. It's not so much as preventing it from coming on the marsh, it's actually getting water off the marsh. Tidal restrictions are still an important factor that we need to get rid of to give these marshes more time. On current conditions, the study showed that the salt marshes with a larger area of unvegetated bare spots are more susceptible to sea level rise than others. There's a tendency of an interior bare spot to spread due to just a tiny increase in sea level rise. So that's an important factor. This one may seem obvious. There seems to be a positive feedback loop. A marsh that has been losing rapidly continues to lose rapidly. And so it's losing peat structure, it's losing structure in the roots. And so it's an accelerating finding here on the current condition of the marsh. And now potential for adaptation. One of the things, we're not doing this just to document damage. We actually want to know which marshes seem to be built for longevity, which ones have the ability to adapt. And marshes that have developed areas or steep slopes against them have no room to move. They have no ability to adapt. Salt marshes over time as sea level rise will try to move inland and create new marsh. You can't do that if there's a seawall. So, there's a lot of sections of seawall on Fort Point, but throughout the rest of the Westport rivers, there's not seawalls. We have a lot of potential for adaptation. Plant community, this one's a little bit obvious too. If the marsh plant community is mostly already tall Spartina, water heavy marsh species, that's not going to make it. If it's high marsh or Peyton's marsh, what we think of salt marsh A, it has more likelihood of survival. And then elevation, it's good that this one ends with elevation because this seems to be mostly survivability of marshes is being mostly driven by how high the marsh platform is. Literally just the height of the peat and build up over time, and it buys it more time against sea level rise. So the overall, I'll give you the summary before I go to the Westport Town Farm because it's really interesting. Overall, bay marshes between 2001 and 2019, we found through 2 different methods. One is a heavy field interpretation method. We are counting plants and measuring elevation and a lot of heavy intensive field collection in sample plots. The other component of this is aerial photography interpretation. So looking at changes in salt marsh aerial extent between 2001 and 2019. What we found was that an average of 9% of bay marshes were lost in that 19-year period, but with wide variability. 2 of our sites only had 1% loss in that 19 years. One of those was Westport Town Farm, which is great news. But 2 other sites, Mattapoisett Neck and Herringbrook and Falmouth, lost 23% and 18% of their area in those 19 years. So wide variability. The average, like I said, bay wide was about 9%. Marsh elevation was the driving factor. If you want to point the finger to one thing that's happening to our marshes. It's clearly sea level rise, no question. The good news about marsh elevation around the bay, we found that 68% of the bay's marshes were at an elevation above mean high water, meaning they have likely survival rates past 2100 under current climate change estimates. So 68% of the marshes have a good chance with good management for still being around in 70 years. And this is great news. That's not great news for the 32 others, percent others, of which salt marsh islands are certain losers. They're the ones that will be lost. Let me tell you about town farms because it's really interesting. We learned a lot from the town farm site. So in the report, you can go to every one of the locations and look at all the metrics: extent of vegetation, elevation, current state. And I'll do a couple of these. The best news about town farm is these fringing marshes in low energy areas. So there's really no tidal action up here. To be up this high in the river and fringing the side of the marsh, this seems to be one of the more resilient types of salt marshes. So this is great news for marshes along both the east and west branch. High elevation, actually town farm salt marsh was our highest elevation. 93% of this marsh is above mean high water, which means it actually has lots of sea level rise resilience built into the marsh. 50% of the marsh is still high marsh species. Only 1% of it is lost any vegetation. And you can see it's right along the rim here. I won't zoom in, there's blue and red here at the top. So this is an example of a marsh that's going to make it over the longer term. None of them make it over the extreme sea level rise projections, but these are the marshes that we're banking on for the ability to adapt, move inland. It has protected land on its upland side, so it has room to move. There's no hardening. This is one of the more successful marshes. Right next door at Allen's Pond, our quadrat at Allen's Pond has lost 6% of its marshes in the past 19 years, and it's losing it in a very different way. So a big pond system, it's all interior loss. You can see this map here of all these mottled colors. This is the marsh, actually water being stranded on the platform of the marsh and then dieback happening from the interior out. It's not shoreline loss. And this is really bad news because Allen's Pond is one of the most ecologically important places on the entire bay. And this loss is the kind of loss that we're trying to address through runneling, through this sort of draining small channels off of the marsh. And that seems to be working, but a big system like Allen's Pond needs a lot of that. Demarest Lloyd, I won't do all of these, but I'll give you a couple of tastes of these. Demarest Lloyd over in Dartmouth, a very stable marsh as well. Not a lot of high wave action or erosional factors, and a high marsh platform, only 1% loss in the past 19 years. I'll quickly just jump to show you some of the towns, the bad news towns. So this is Brant Island in Mattapoisett is a really awful case. If you drive down Mattapoisett Neck Road, you can look in at this salt marsh. It's one of the worst examples of a rapidly declining marsh on the bay. 23% of this marsh area we studied was lost in the last 19 years. It is all high marsh. It's low. It is, according to everything we learned in this study, it is doomed in a very short term period. And that's what we want to know which ones. Again, the point of the study was to understand levels of ability to adapt and resilience. This is Herring Brook behind Old Silver Beach in Falmouth, an interior estuary system, which has also seen 18% of loss in the past 19 years. So not great news there at all. I could go on I should mention our partners in this. So the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program does all the aerial interpretation for us. The United States Geologic Survey is doing a lot of the ranking assessments. So you can see the science that's involved in sort of doing the ratios around understanding resilience based on elevation versus plant community versus how you rank the stressors. USGS is helping us with all that science, as is the Woodwell Climate Center in Falmouth. So that's the quick summary. The whole report is here. I'm the principal author on this is Dr. Rachel Jakuba on our staff. It is not me, so I give Rachel the credit for a great report here. And I guess that was the quickest I can do that report right there. That's what you guys get. Any questions, I guess?
Yes, Mark. First of all, thank you so much. And as you said, I think Michael sent out this report so people have access to it. Jim Whiten, not surprisingly, Mr. Thin-Layer Deposition has his hand up.
Yes, Mark, I think this is a great report. And John Bullard has expressed to me the thought process of the Buzzards Bay Coalition about thin layer deposition on salt marshes. I believe that it is still worth a try for one huge reason. You point out the town farm property as a potential for marsh migration. I would say that 80% or more of the shoreline of the Westport rivers is not amenable to salt marsh migration because of the steepness of slope, or that it's built upon already, or there's a road there, or there's a seawall there. But I think it's mostly the slope. And if we're going to say that, well, I don't know if this is true, but I've always heard that Westport has 23% of the estuarine shoreline of Buzzards Bay. And if we're going to say that we're going to lose 90% of our salt marshes because there's no place for them to go, how can we have a healthy estuary? Are there any estuaries that have no salt marshes that are healthy? I don't think so. And we had Joe Costa on a call, I don't know, Michael Burris, I don't know how long ago that was, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he was opining that we ought to concentrate our money on places where the salt marshes can migrate. That's not going to help Westport. This is a death knell for the system if we don't try to do something else. And I think that we really should try some experimental thin layer deposition, either on the landward marshes or the island marshes in the West Branch. My wife has lived in the place where the spot where we live, and I won't tell you how old she is, but in her lifetime, I think the salt marshes that you can see from her house have diminished by over 50%. And I think that there's a lot of reasons, which you outline all the other reasons, but I think primarily sea level rise is probably the culprit, and probably the other issues like increased boat traffic and everything else is probably another reason. But
Yep.
I'm not willing to give up. I don't know that Westport should. And I think this report is great, and you try to give it a hopeful spin to it from the town farm area. And it's one of the only areas on the river that has an open landward protected area that would be capable of having salt marsh migration.
Yep. Yeah. So a couple thoughts quickly is I think this report, Jim, absolutely confirms our belief before this was that there is no, if you don't do thin layer deposition on the Westport salt marsh islands, they'll be gone. There's everything we learned in this report about elevation, plant community, marsh characteristic types, the geomorphology of the marsh. Everything here says there's no future for those marshes without intervention. So I think that's good. I mean, that will be helpful in making the case for funders and permitting agencies. Thin layer deposition is still not allowed in Massachusetts, and our DEP has been very resistant to it, even though it's done now much more commonly in New Jersey and Delaware and everywhere else. I don't want to give up on the West Branch Islands or any of the Westport Islands. And it has to be paired with a sediment source, like a dredging project. I think if we can make a compelling case that there's a need for dredging to put the sediment back on the marshes, and there's a maintenance system for doing that, we should try, because Westport, it would be my vote for the entire bay as to where we should try thin layer deposition. So I'm agreeing with you.
Thank you, Mark. Mike Sullivan has his hand up.
Thank you, John and Mark. Really nice job, Mark, on this report. It's really going to be helpful to us. As you know, we have 10 sites within the river, 3 or 4 of them within a mile of the a town farm where you have your site. And so I know this is going to dovetail really nicely with what you found in that area. And I think you can even confirm, I think that your earlier report showed that the loss in the lower reaches of the river was much more dramatic. Okay. And that's what we're talking about, the losses here. And I also wanted to thank Jim. You put together a call, I don't know, a month ago now, Jim, with Joe Costa about this subject of, how do you get through a possible application process with just an experiment of some type. And we came away with some good suggestions, one of which was, Mark, that this has to be dovetailed with a dredging project. So we'll look forward. We're still assembling the tidal elevation data across our transects, which are, like I said, 10 of them in the river, and hopefully in the spring here we'll have some information that we can share with you folks. But everything that we've learned so far, it does sort of confirm what you said. This is a long-term sea level rise, a delta between how much the marsh can grow versus how much sea level is going up. Or if the marsh can even grow. It may be that in some of these high flow areas, the marsh just is not going to accumulate material. So anyways, very nice job. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Well, Mike, I think that if you take what Mark has, the way he has summarized the report, Jim's point, and Mark's response, it focuses, it could focus some of the work of your committee in terms of, it's hard to imagine Westport without Marsh Islands. I mean, that focuses attention. And as Mark said, looking at the trend line, you can say, 20 or 30 years, we don't have Marsh Islands. And the people of Westport can drive River Road or Route 88 or, East Beach Road and imagine that. No Marsh Islands. And the answer, as Jim raises it and Mark says, there is no answer. Elevation is the key, other than thin layer deposition. And the only way you can do it, and Mark said this, but so did Joe Costa, is pairing it with dredging. And it's expensive. That's what Joe Costa said. I mean, that's why you've got to pair it with dredging, it's really expensive. And so it's a very specific, concrete problem. As your committee, which has been looking, what did we start with, 30 or 40 issues? And it's down to 5 or 6, Does this become one of the 5 or 6? But thanks to that report, you're starting to get it really well defined. And I think if your committee meets next week, you start to say, does this become one of the 5 or 6 that we want to tackle? You're starting to get a very rich amount of data on this.
Yes.
So,
and I'd like to also just add one point, John, that if we're going to dovetail this or couple it with dredging, one thing we have to be careful about is dredging increases the channel, the depth and breadth, and increases flow. And that's an interesting juxtaposition when you want to try. So the dredging source material may want to come from somewhere else. If we do this sort of thing, just food for thought. Because one of the hypotheses that we're working on is that there's a positive feedback loop where when we lose marsh, we have more flow and we get more tidal range. So.
All right, we got Joseph, Jake, and then Constance. Joseph.
I just wanted to congratulate Mark It's really a seminal report. I did take some time to review it, and it's exceptionally well done, professional, and I think accessible to the general public. So this is a very valuable document, I think, for communicating the issues. And my questions about the migration of the salt marsh and measures that could be taken have essentially been answered by others. Thank you. It's a real long-term effort and issue here that the town is dealing with. But I'm confident, in yourselves to be able to begin to address it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jake, who's a member of the water subcommittee. Jake.
Thank you, John. And actually, Mike said, Sullivan actually said what I was thinking. I know there's attempts to increase flow on the, north of, Hicks Bridge. And I think it's kind of going to be in a catch-22 if you increase flow and have impacts on those marshes. The marshes obviously closer to where there's more flow down towards the mouth of the river. So Mike already addressed it. I think, you got to try to figure out if we try to decrease nitrogen levels in the river by increasing flow, does that at the same time impact the marshes and the estuaries? So
yes,
it's tough.
Good point. Constance, who's also an active member of the water subcommittee. Constance. You're on mute, Constance. Still on mute. There you go.
We go. Sorry. Yeah, I look at it right over Sanford Flat, and I have been watching it disappear over the last 20 years. I mean, it really has opened up in the center of it a lot. But I have two questions, and these may be very super simplistic, but should we not have low wake areas up around in the river where there are the salt marshes? I mean, in the summer, it is true. I mean, there is so much, and getting more and more of the water skiing and the jet boats going back and forth right, along that area. And I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really bother me that much. People like to water ski, but I mean, I see how it impacts. I mean, I can see it, how it washes up really violently on my shore, and I can see it doing the same thing very easily on the salt flats. And I just wonder, I mean, if we're going to go to all the trouble, which I think is probably a good idea, to try to add materials and do this, would that not be one thing that we should institute that might be helpful? And and I have this other question. I love the ospreys and the nest out there, and have myself gone out and tagged them, and it's an amazing thing. But I wonder if I've always wondered if our walking on the salt flats to go back and forth to the nest doesn't somehow compromise them. Does it, or does it not?
I'll answer that. I'll answer the second one just from the purposes of our study. We're actually looking at whether or not we should be shifting to every other year plot assessments for the marshes, because we're concerned about how often we visit our sites. And so the foot pressure on the marsh we don't want to be wearing in. We're actually altering the marsh by studying it. So it's something we're concerned about with this study. And we may add sites and actually spread out the distribution of how often we visit them as a different approach. Because after doing this for a couple of years, our scientists are concerned about it too.
It seems to me that would make sense. When I stopped doing it, actually, because I started feeling so uncomfortable walking on them. And every time you go out there, you'll break off a piece. I mean, you just can't help it. You sink into them, trying to get the ladder up and trying to get the boat in and trying to clomp on over to them. So I actually stopped doing it. One, because I kind of hated just harassing the birds, and two, because I was so worried about walking on the salt marshes. So, yeah. Thanks.
But this is Jake again. Sorry, to Constance.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
How do we do that? Because I mean, I can drive by on the river and see kayakers dragging their kayaks up on this stuff, and at low tide and various other things. So I agree with Constance's point, but then I don't think going and obviously trying to take care of the osprey is the issue. I think more of the issue is the increased recreation on the river, and how do you educate people to the fact that they're destroying certain parts of that river. I mean, we've got down the head of Westport, dropping in a couple hundred kayaks in a weekend. Now it's like a kayak race, but I don't know how to address that, back to her point on the wake stuff. But it's kind of difficult because you do see a lot of people in those marshes throughout the river, with either boats or kayaks. So
yeah, it's I used to do historic preservation, and preservationists had that dilemma all the time. If you want to preserve something, you don't let anyone in it. You don't let any light on paintings. You don't let any people in house museums. That's the way you preserve them. But if you want to educate people, you let people in and you let light on paintings, and it's a contradiction. And so what you have to do is balance those contradictory purposes. And so what we want is people to enjoy the river, because if you enjoy it, then you'll value it and you'll protect it. Yet, if you let people in, they will wear it out. And so, Jake, you've got this contradiction that you have to manage.
Well, I think there are ways to enjoy the river without, going back and forth with a
That's what I mean, Constance, is you have to do it in a way that balances.
right. And I mean, it just seems like, of all the things we're talking about, that those two items would be fairly easily addressed with some education, some signs, talking to the kayak renters and say, hey, make sure that your people that rent them don't drag them up on the, that they understand that that's not a good thing to do, but anyway, I've said enough, but
So I want to move on, because we've still got other stuff here. But Mark, thank you so much for this report. And I think you've really put some significant weight and definition on some issues. And I know Chairman Sullivan is going to figure out, where we go with this. It's really, you've done a great service for the CRC. I appreciate that, Mark, very much. Infrastructure and safety. I know Bob Daler's, is he still? Yeah, Bob, you're still with us. You had a very complete report at our last meeting.
Yeah, there really is no update to that, John. I think we know what our vulnerability areas are, and we know potential actions, from simple things like establishing evacuation routes to actually raising critical low spots and culverts and things. So there's a lot to do, but it'll all be wrapped up in eventually in our report.
Okay, and if people want a refresher, it's very well covered in the minutes. So I urge people to look at that review there. Thank you, Bob. Under health, we've got Phil here, and we've got Dr. Michael Yagman, who went over some difficult issues with the students of the environment committee. So Mike, why don't we start with you, and then if Phil wants to add other things from the health committee, he can do that. So Mike, why don't you start?
Sure. Well, in the interest of time, I'll be brief, because I think we already heard from Lily. But John gave a wonderful kind of overview of our committee for this initial meeting with the 5 or 6 students that were there. Jeff talked about the grant. I talked about some health impacts, much of which we've gone over in this committee, but talked about the unique vulnerability of children and the fact that we really wanted to engage them, and I think that was the main purpose of the meeting, to engage their passion and talking with their parents, and then the other issue I think that we emphasize is the fact that we don't want this to be all negative and pessimistic about the fact that the adults aren't solving the problem and every prediction is that things are just getting worse. We wanted to give them some hopeful suggestions. And so we talked about electric vehicles, that limiting idling certainly supported in a major way their pollinator garden. Talked about school lunches, really supporting local agriculture. Talked about the importance of composting and about green spaces, planting trees. So we try to give them very specific things to advocate about, both with their parents and with the community, and hope that they can increase the membership in the environmental club. We offered to do an assembly. We hope that they would publish something in their school newspaper. And I think, it was a very good start. And we hope we'll have a successor to Lily since she'll graduate this June. So that's, John, anything you or David want to
Well,
add?
I think under the health committee, the other thing that Michael brought up, and this really comes under the term resilience. And Michael went into what is resilience? It's the ability to bounce back. It can be the ability of a marsh to bounce back, or it can be the ability of a human or a teenager to bounce back. And it's Michael who's done a lot of work in this. Climate change can create a lot of anxiety in young people. And there are a lot of studies that show this. And so Michael brought this up with these young people, the increased amounts of anxiety. And as I mentioned to Michael, this was a meeting we had at 2:00 in the new high school, middle school. And then at 7:00, I went to a candidates night at the middle school, high school. Jim White was there, Bob Dale, a few others, and Tom Aubin, the superintendent, got up and said that Westport is one of the few towns in Massachusetts that's joined a national lawsuit against major purveyors of social media for increasing the amount of anxiety in students. And so last night I emailed Tom, because we were talking to your students 5 hours ago about this very issue, that the superintendent said the amount of anxiety is going through the roof. And it's not just about climate change, but it is alarming. And so resilience is about the ability to bounce back. And so Michael and Superintendent Aubin and I are going to have lunch, when I get back, to deal with this issue of resilience, and how do you bounce back? Because when Al Gore taught me, how to deliver the talk on climate change, he said you got a time budget, you got a science budget, you got a glaze over budget, but you also have a hope budget. You have to make sure that people have hope about this, because if they don't, then then you give up. And if you give up, you can't solve the problem. So this issue of anxiety, while it's an issue with everybody, is especially important I don't think necessarily just with young people. It might also be especially important with seniors. I'm not sure. Michael, you're the expert on that, but
I
it,
think
it comes under the purview of the health subcommittee. And it was really important that Michael raised this with the young people we met with yesterday.
yeah, I would just say that I'm thrilled that the superintendent is really addressing this issue in Westport, because we now have national data. The CDC just reported suicide as the second leading cause of death in adolescents. And we're now starting to see it in middle school. So, it's multifactorial, but certainly the anxiety about climate, the social media risks, which he's also addressing in this lawsuit. We've really got to all weigh in and try to help these kids.
So I think, when we started the CRC, it was to make sure that we didn't get hung up on just one part of climate change like sea level rise, but we looked at all the ways the climate change can affect us, high heat levels, things like that. So that we made sure that we were trying to see all the dimensions of this. So, Phil, anything else in health that you want to talk about? He's on mute. If not, I want to keep marching along here. Under agriculture, I've met with Ray Raposa. This is a committee that is really hard to get moving. And I'm open to all kinds of suggestions. It may be, that the answer to agriculture is the students going out and interviewing farmers. That may, who knows? When I met with Ray Raposa, I went and saw him at his place. He said, "Are you here to get me off my sorry ass and start working?" I said, "Yes, I'm here to get you off your sorry ass." So, but it's easier now. It's going to be even harder, when it gets into May. So we really need to. Agriculture is important in Westport, and we need that committee to get going. But I do want to introduce on the agenda. I'm not sure the connection to agriculture, but there doesn't need to be a connection. Laura Gardner is with us today. Laura Gardner is the head of the local climate project. Now, when Al Gore said he wanted to get the word out he wanted to get neighbors telling people about climate change. So he created an organization called the Climate Project, and which trained people how to give a talk on climate change. I signed up for the second training session down in Nashville, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whenever it was. And I've given 70 talks since then. But Laura runs the local chapter in southeastern Massachusetts and meets every month. And she's a dynamo, which you're about to find out. And she just put in the chat the website. So you can find out what they're doing, which is all kinds of things from getting cars to stop idling. Well, you can't get a car to stop idling. You can only get the driver to stop idling. But, it's all kinds of different things. And what she wants to talk to us about in Westport is a campaign to get more use of renewable energy. So, Laura, will you tell us what's on your ever active mind?
I'd love to. Thank you for that introduction. And I've been really fascinated to hear about everything going on in Westport. So thanks for all the work you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay. All right. Can you see that okay?
Not yet. Here we are. Yep, it's coming up.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to be talking to you tonight about the aggregation program. And when we talk about like wanting to have programs that give us hope and make us feel like we're actually doing something, as it tries to load, there we go. This is a program that I am really excited about, and I've been really excited about it ever since I learned about it back in 2020. So I am Laura. I'm a mom. I'm a librarian at Dartmouth Middle School, where I've been for 14 years, and I'm a climate activist. And what I get really excited about is when we can find local solutions to the climate crisis. And the work we're doing to preserve marshlands and educate youth and all of that is so important. And another thing that we can do is participate in the aggregation program that we are already a part of at a higher level and add more renewables to our mix. So tonight I'm going to talk about why we should care about this, what is aggregation, and what are the next steps for Westport. So why care about energy? Number one, the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard is increasing. So the RPS is the percentage of renewable energy from residents that the state requires, and that increases every year. So right now it's 22%. The state requires that every community, other than municipal light communities, which are not pulling their weight, but every other community have 22% of their energy mix come from renewable sources right now. The goal is that we'll get to 70% renewable energy by 2030. We've made a commitment to that. And there are actually penalties in place if we don't make it there. And other states have made even better, more advanced goals than we have. But this is our commitment right now. So we need more renewable infrastructure, and obviously offshore wind, and there are lots of other ways we're going to get there. But we also need to just build that infrastructure right now and build the demand as well. Of course, also the planet is burning. The climate crisis is here. We know that. There are multiple reports out there where you can see the evidence that it's already happening and that it's only going to get worse. And on top of that, of course, prices for dirty fuel are increasing and are unstable and will continue to be volatile. And we know that. So in January, basic Eversource rates increased significantly. For a family using 500 kilowatt hours per month, they saw a huge bill increase by around $40. But aggregation members did not see this bill increase because the aggregation program purchases energy over a 3-year period rather than a 6-month period that Eversource has to do. So the aggregation program also saves people money. So aggregation is a local solution to needing more renewable energy, wanting to create that demand for renewable energy, but also wanting to save people money at the same time. It's kind of a win-win. So aggregation works, and there are 3 main parts to it. So number one, towns buy in bulk. In 2014, these communities got together and decided to do aggregation. 2016 was when the first contract started. It's now 25 towns. It's Westport to Wareham, and then a whole bunch of other towns, including Dracut and Attleboro and Acushnet, and some that I've never heard of. But at any rate, it's the biggest aggregation program in the state, and they all buy energy together. Each community has a representative that goes to the table and then has the broker go out and purchase energy. And they purchase it at a 3-year contract. They get a fixed rate for those 3 years. And the rates have always ended up better than the Eversource basic rate that's out there because we're buying in bulk and because we're purchasing over such a length of time. Aggregation also harnesses green energy. Statewide, Green Energy Consumers Alliance reports that because of aggregation, we've harnessed over 1 million megawatt hours above what was required at the state level. So it's really building a lot of local infrastructure. And again, this is renewable energy from New England. And it's all over New England, all different kinds of renewable energy. And it's something that creates local jobs, improves our local air quality. It's a really good thing. So in Westport, this is what the aggregation rate looks like right now. So it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour for the standard product. But as of 2021, when this contract started up, residents had the option as an individual to opt up to 50% more renewable energy or 100% renewable energy for their home. And low businesses could do this as well, small businesses. And all of these rates right now are better than the Eversource basic rate. R2 for low-income residents still exists. This doesn't affect that. And residents still get their same bill from Eversource. It just has a different supplier listed. So one of my goals has always just been to get the word out about the aggregation program and make sure people understand it's not a scam. It is a town-approved program that is intended to save residents money and also be better for the planet because it offers these options for going renewable. If you have solar panels on your house, like I know John does, great. You should still opt in at the 50% or 100% level because it shows support for the program. It doesn't change anything about the way your bill works. Even if you're sending money back to the, if you're making money and sending electricity back to the grid. So to look at this in terms of real numbers, for 500 kilowatts of electricity in a month, it would cost $130 for basic Eversource for that 500 kilowatts of electricity. It would cost $195 for those people in Westport who are on National Grid because National Grid's prices are even higher. And it's only $52 if you're on the standard aggregation option. So huge savings. If you're on the 100% option, it's still huge savings right now. So we really want people to know the aggregation program is not a scam. There are options for going renewable that don't involve putting anything on top of your house. You can just fill out a form on the website. It's very easy. And then we also, there's a third part of what I want people to know about that I'll get to in a minute. I also want to mention that there are predatory energy companies out there. They are legal in Massachusetts. They shouldn't be. One of my friends looked at his bill and saw that he was paying 60 cents per kilowatt hour from a predatory energy company. And he called them and said, I'm switching to the aggregation program. Luckily, they didn't charge a fee for leaving. And he did it successfully. And he's now at 100% electricity, saving tons of money, 100% renewable electricity. So look out for those predatory energy companies that get you in at one rate and then switch you to a higher rate later. So the average customer is saving a ton of money if they're in the aggregation program. We really encourage people to go 100%. And so I have these cute little stickers that you can put on your water bottle or your bumper or wherever you want to show that you did opt up and you want to let people know about the program. So next steps for Westport. We want all the towns on the South Coast to ask for a higher percentage of renewables in the next contract. Right now, Westport has the basic option is nothing above the renewable standard. It's 22%. That's how much renewables the basic option is for everyone. If you look at this map, you'll see that Fairhaven is green. That's my town. Fairhaven in 2020, we convinced them to go up by 10% town-wide. Makes a much bigger difference than getting 20 or 30 people to go 100% to get the whole town to go 10% more renewable town-wide. So we did that by advocating at the select board level. It really only took a few people advocating loudly and, making the case, and they went for it. It cost about $2 more per month per resident. We had to have a campaign to let people know how to opt back to the Fairhaven Basic, which is the 10 cents a kilowatt hour that you have for your standard rate. I just looked on the Green Energy Consumers Alliance and they have like a little report for Fairhaven. And because of that 10% increase in renewables townwide, we generated 3,694 megawatt hours, enough to power 528 homes. So something to be proud of. I'm really proud of the work that we did in Fairhaven so far. And I'm hoping to see the whole South Coast go a pretty green color when the next contract comes due, which is this year. So one of my big asks is that everyone who thinks this is a good idea, speak to your select board members and say, hey, I heard about the aggregation program. I heard it's an easy way for us to increase the renewable energy used here in town, I think we should go up by 10%. I think we should at least look at the numbers and consider it, because we care about Westport's future and we want that marshland to be there forever. And this will improve our local air quality. This will make a difference. If Fairhaven can do it, then Westport can do it. The other thing I want people to do is raise awareness and look at your bill. Your bill should look like this. It should say Constellation Westport. That means you're in the aggregation program. And then you can see the rate you're paying right here. If you get a National Grid bill, it should look like this: Constellation New Energy Westport CEA. If it says something else, you can go to the Mass CEA website. I think that's my next slide right here. So it's masscea.com/Westport. It looks like this. And if you scroll down, there's a very simple form where it just asks for your information and your Eversource or National Grid number. And then you just hit submit and you join the program. I gave this presentation at the Westport Grange last week, and several people signed up for 100% on the spot, which was pretty exciting. So I'm asking people to ask for a higher percentage of renewables in the next contract. I'm asking you to raise awareness and make sure people know about the aggregation program. And then third, we'd love it if more people would go to 50% or 100% as an individual as well. And, you know, I encourage you to maybe put something in your local paper. I put something in our neighborhood news about the work that how excited we are about the aggregation program, thanking the select board for being a part of the aggregation program. And this is something that you can do too. And that is my presentation. So I'd take any questions if anybody has any.
Questions? Anybody have questions? Jim Whiten has a question. You're muted, Jim.
Laura, with Westport, you're right. Westport is in the aggregation program, but they do it in conjunction with a lot of the different towns in the South Coast, in Bristol County through Serpent. Are you aware of that? So you need to make a presentation at at one of the monthly Serpent meetings.
I would love to. I'll make this presentation absolutely anywhere. So, you know, I've given it to Dartmouth Democrats. I've given it to the Westport Grange. I've given it to the Fairhaven Sustainability. I think there's, the New Bedford Democrats, but I'm willing to talk to anybody about it. And yes, it's 25 communities total that are in our aggregation program.
Right. And a lot of them in the Serpent area. There's 27 communities in Serpent. And I think if you made that pitch, you're going to be able to hit 20 some odd customers, potential towns at once. So
great. I would love the contact information for how I can get on that sort of agenda. So thank you.
Does somebody have her email so I can?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
So are you saying, Jim, that this is a decision not by our select board, but by Serpent?
No, I'm saying that Serpent arranged for the towns that wanted to do it.
Okay.
So
now Laura, my bill, I'm just looking at my bill, says supplier Constellation Westport CEA. What does that mean? That
means you're in the aggregation program. That's good.
Does that mean I made a decision or Westport made a decision?
No, it's an opt. So you're automatically put in the program unless you did something different, which is great. You know, nobody in Westport had to do anything to join the aggregation, but a few people, you know, maybe somebody came to their door and said, do you want electricity? And it'll be renewable and it's this price, and it looked good. And that was like probably a predatory energy supplier, and they switched. Or they got nervous and they thought the aggregation program was a scam when they got it in the mail. And so then they decided to opt out. And so we just want to make sure that people are in. When I did this at the Westport Grange, a couple people had something called Clean Choice Energy. That's one of those predatory energy suppliers. A couple people had Eversource Basic. That's, you know, the regular Eversource. And so they were paying more than they had to, and they weren't enjoying the savings.
Okay. Shauna, I know you were driving. I don't know if you can unmute. Do you have any comment as a member of the select board on this?
No, I mean, I think we've supported it in the past. I think we've supported it. I don't recall the last time we talked about it though.
Okay, thank you.
John,
Any
just-
other questions of Laura? Mike?
Well, just we got into this program a number of years ago, and we've sort of been on just renewing our participation, but we're in it, as Jim said, with a number of other communities, and that gives us some economy, some negotiation power, and economy of scale. So we'll renew it, but it comes to us as an option with the best deal that the aggregate can negotiate.
Yes, and in 2020, we were told that the communities all had to choose the same rate of renewables by someone, and it turned out that wasn't true, and so that's why Fairhaven went with 10% more renewables. So we're just asking that other communities consider and look at the price, because for only $2 more a month to be able to say that you generated enough renewable electricity to power 528 homes, it's pretty powerful. And it helps. It makes a difference.
So in the chat is Laura's presentation, and Jim has also asked if you would share your email. I'd also mention, just for interest, that the planning board has permitted a number of solar farms primarily on agricultural land. And we did a calculation at some point, and I don't remember the exact percentage, but I think not all or not even most of what has been permitted has been built, because it takes a long time for Eversource to give the permitted farms permission to hook up. But what we have permitted, once it is built, is enough solar energy to power about, I think, 150% of what Westport needs. And that does not include solar panels on individual houses like Lori's and mine. That's just what comes before the planning board. Now, that's a different issue than the aggregation program that Laura just described, but it is pertinent to the problem we're trying to solve, which is creating renewable energy. So, Laura, thank you so much for that information. There's so many people who think that doing the right thing always costs more. And what you're showing is, no, you can have clean energy and it saves money. And so that's a valuable lesson. I do want to raise the issue of adding a committee. And we had earlier two people who had to leave, Wendy Nicholas and Kit Wise, both Westport residents with tremendous experience and reputation in historic preservation. And they both approached me with a fascinating suggestion. They wanted to join the Climate Resilience Committee so that they could look at a very specific issue, which is the impact that climate has on historic resources. Wendy worked for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and as you might imagine, many historic properties, you think of Jamestown, Virginia, were built right near the edge of the water. And so when you get sea level rise, you get these old wooden buildings that all of a sudden are underwater, or old graveyards that are underwater. And so there's a very specific issue of historic resources. Sometimes they're houses, sometimes they're graveyards, sometimes they're other, or you think of the head of Westport, where we spent a lot of seaport money rebuilding the edge of the head of Westport. And it doesn't take much sea level rise before that starts flooding all the time. And they said, we would like to just look at historic resources in New Bedford, historic structures or other resources, and identify which ones might be subject to stress due to various effects from climate change. And that might be sea level rise. It might be various pests that might come up, wood boring, insects, who knows what it might be. But ascertain what our vulnerability is and then make recommendations. I said, that doesn't fall into any of our committees, and we're a historic town. I think that could be a great service to our community because we have a lot of historic resources here. So I think, and Kit and Wendy have national reputations. Some of you may know them. So my suggestion, hey, why look a gift horse in the mouth? They want to provide this service to us. Is that if you think this is a good idea, then I would suggest somebody makes a motion that we create a 6th subcommittee on historic resources. Jim, is that a motion? You're making that motion?
Yes, I stumbled upon your meeting while you were meeting with them, and
Yeah.
I agree that you should do that. So I make a motion that we do.
Is there a second? Second by Michael Yagman. Any discussion on this or questions about it? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and we'll have, that'll be a small committee, just 2 people, which means they'll probably get a lot done. Won't be a lot of arguments. Okay, good. Other business, open meeting law update. Michael Burris, I think you're going to tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it was last month I sent an email letting everyone know that the remote meeting allowance is set to expire at the end of the month, and that is still the case. However, the House has approved the governor's supplemental 2023 budget, and when they did that, they amended it to include an extension of allowing remote meetings through March 31st of 2025. So that's really good news. There's been a lot of chatter and some of the planning listservs I follow about how it's very unpopular to let that expire. So I anticipate that it would be approved, but it has to make its way through the process. So I'll let you all know when there is a decision made on the budget bill, and hopefully that aspect of it is kept in the bill.
Thank you very much. Any questions of Michael on that? I think the ability to meet remotely is a tremendous asset for us and seems to get us really good participation. That is the end of our agenda, except for next meeting date. We have been going at an every other month pace, which allows the subcommittees to meet in the intervening months. I think that's a good pace unless somebody wants to either go slower or faster. If that's the pace and we do a second Thursday, that would be May 11th at 5 o'clock. Is that okay with people?
It's
Oh, Michael Yagman, that's not good for you?
I'm away out of the country that day.
And the other thing is, John, the watershed has a 4:00, one of our talks. It happens to be Blue Revolution about aquaculture and using,
On the 11th?
on the 11th at 4. So it's,
Oh, well, we don't want to do you want to go a week after that?
the week after that, we have our board meeting on Thursday at 5. But I mean, you don't need me at the meeting.
Well,
You can-
how about the first Thursday?
that's fine for me.
What did that be, the 4th?
Yeah.
What does May 4th look like for people? Can we do the 4th? All right, let's do the 4th, May 4th.
I would like to remind people to vote in the April 11 election and the May 2nd town meeting.
Okay. All right, we will do May 4th. I'll write that down. At 5 o'clock, Michael Sullivan. May
Hey, I was
4th.
here on time. I was early.
I know.
You just keep switching the clocks on, John.
And don't forget this weekend, right? Bring forward. All right, May 4th. All right, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Sean. can you
Motion
tell
to
us-
adjourn, second. Any debate? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? We'll see you all at Election Day. Okay, vote early and often.
7
I'm
o'clock at
running
the
for
town meeting.
re-election, by the way. Thank you all.
7 o'clock on the 2nd for town meeting. Yeah.
Thanks, John.
We're adjourned.